Online for Authors, where I, Teri M Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is V.S. Gardner, author of the book A Killing on Hardee Street. V.S. Gardner excitedly achieved her lifelong dream of becoming a published author when her first novel, A Killing on Hardee Street, was published in 2020. Holding to the belief that life's greatest treasures are found in relationships, she enjoys spending time with family and friends. In my book review, I stated A Killing on Hardee Street is the first in a series located in Logan, South Carolina, a small town not too far from Myrtle Beach. In fact, this tiny town is patterned after her hometown. In this novel, we meet Vonda, a recent widow trying to adjust to her new circumstances. We also meet Marshall and get introduced to his family and his construction company. As Vonda watches new homes being built from her back deck, she sees something she wasn't supposed to see, and this lands her in the thick of a mysterious disappearance. Will she be next? I enjoyed the easy tone of this cozy mystery, and you will too. Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with V.S. Gardner, author of A Killing on Hardee Street. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Good to be here today. I appreciate it.
It is wonderful to have you. Before we get started, though, I want you to give us just a quick little elevator speech. What is A Killing on Hardee Street about?
Okay, well, I'm going to pick up the book because that is my actual chair on my back patio. And I was watching a house be built over in this corner of our neighborhood. And that's where the idea of the story came from. So the main character, Vonda, sits out in her rocking chair and has her coffee every morning, and she's watching a house be built. Well, a killing takes place at the construction site, and she has clues and doesn't know it. So that's the premise of the book.
Wonderful. So I want to know this. Have you always wanted to be an author?
I did. I have written poetry ever since I was about 10 years old, and I've personal journaled. I keep a personal journal. I write in that every day. When I was a kid, the older people will know what this means, but we used to watch the Waltons, and John Boy Walton wanted to be a writer. So my parents teasingly called me John Boy because I always wanted to write, and I was in my room writing. And when I graduated from high school, I bought a typewriter with my graduation money. That was my electric typewriter. So yes, I always wanted to do that.
Fantastic. And when did you get the opportunity to actually be published for the first time?
I actually had a poem published at one point, but I had to pay for the book.
Yeah.
So I don't really
remember those. I remember those.
I don't really count that. So A Killing on Hardee was my first actual publication.
And that came out how long ago?
In 2020.
Fantastic. So what prompted you from going from essentially a wannabe, I've had an electric typewriter since high school person to a published author? What was the change?
Well, it actually was a joke. I have a friend that I stay in touch with in Ohio, which is where I was from, and I moved to South Carolina. Well, anyway, I sleep type. That's a name I made up. When I personal journal, as you know, Teri, when we get older, we get tireder easily.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm typing in my laptop and I fall asleep, but my brain and my fingers keep working. And so the next day, 5 or 6 sentences don't make sense. So I was sending my friend these excerpts, and we were on the phone one day laughing about, this makes no sense. What in the world? And she said, you should write a book where there's a crime committed and there are clues in the sleep typing. And we both laughed about it, but it kept playing on my brain. And a couple of weeks later, my husband and I walk, and we were walking, and I said to him a couple of weeks later, I'm thinking about writing a book. And he's an avid reader. And he said, well, you have to catch him in the first chapter. So a couple of weeks later, I wrote the first chapter of that book, and the killing takes place in the first chapter.
In the first chapter,
So,
right. Now, this
no, I didn't
particular,
do.
I was going to say, this particular book didn't have
I was just going to say
the sleep typing, right?
I did not do that in the first book. I did it in the second.
In the second book,
So, yes.
right? And I loved that whole thing, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But I
Okay.
want to really quickly do a quick. I'm very excited. We are now being sponsored by a book club, and it's an online book club. So I wanted to let everyone know that if you want to keep this book discussion going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. It'll be in the show notes. The link will be down there. And as a member of this amazing book community, you'll have the opportunity to win a digital copy of Vanessa's book, A Killing on Hardee Street. So head on over to the link, sign yourself up for the community, look for that post, and then you'll be able to win a book. So that's really exciting. So I'm curious now about your genre. Okay. You are writing what I would put as maybe more of a cozy mystery, maybe a Christian cozy mystery. Is that about where you would put it?
I put it in cozy mystery. I do have faith in it. Usually one character at least is a believing person. There are characters that are not, that are struggling with it. So to me, it's just part of the personality of the person. So I don't like to lock it in to say Christian, because there are other things that are not quite, positive and uplifting actions going on. But definitely mystery, cozy mystery, definitely.
Cozy mystery. Do you like to read cozy mystery?
Yeah, I do. As a reader, it's really weird. I think it's weird because you think every author reads a lot. Well, I love to read, but my problem is when I read, I do nothing else. So when I was young, raising my family, I wouldn't cook. I wouldn't take care of the kids. I was like, I'm reading this book. Right. So I had to curb that as a young person. So I've gotten back into reading a lot more now. And I do like mysteries and thrillers.
Is there other genres that you enjoy?
I enjoy, I don't really know what you call all the genres, but I enjoy things. I'm not a big love story person, but I like issues in life. I do like some historical fiction, and just where there's a story, there's an event taking place, there are people overcoming things,
right?
And I don't mind a love story in the mix, but I just don't read just a love story.
Yeah, you don't want just a romance. You would like something that had more.
Right.
I tend to tell people that I write character-driven fiction.
Yes,
and then my genre is just dependent on where my characters said they needed to be. So that's kind of, and that sounds like maybe that's what you like to read, is a character who is overcoming obstacles. Yeah. And then if it happens to be set in historical times, well, that's fine. But if it happens to be modern day or even fantasy, as long as it's a character that has, a strong, I don't know, like they grip me. That's what I like to read as well. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And I used to say I didn't like historical fiction, but I've actually read some that I really like. So it's not something I seek out, but like you said, if the story is right.
Yeah. And that's the way I feel about fantasy. I used to say that I didn't like fantasy books, but I have found several recently that I actually have enjoyed thoroughly. And so I think it is about the character. Like, does the character, for me with fantasy, the character has to overcome the stuff that I have trouble believing. And if the character can do that, then I can go right along with the magic and the other things that are happening. So I
might have to have you refer a few, because I haven't really read a lot of fantasy.
I will. Yeah. So definitely, like, if you look on the podcast, if you'll go to the YouTube channel, I have them.
Okay.
Sorted out, and you'll see that I have one for fantasy, and there are a couple in there that I have really enjoyed. I think you might like. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So give it a try and see what you think. Yeah.
I will.
Okay. I know that you've written now 3. They're not really a series. I guess they're a series. They're standalones.
Yes. That's why I struggle with the word series.
Yes. But the characters definitely, if you met Vonda in the first one, you're going to see her again in the second and third, and you see some of the other characters come in and out of those. Why did you choose to do that versus totally standalone new characters?
Well, so when I describe them, first of all, I say they are standalone mysteries with returning characters. That's how I
Exactly.
say it.
Exactly.
So really, I didn't plan on writing another book. I wrote the first book and I thought, wow, I fulfilled my lifetime dream. I'm a published author. But when people read it, they started saying, I wonder what Vonda gets into next. I'd like to know what's going to happen with this part of the story. So I thought, well, I did this once, I can probably do it again. And to me, I'm not a typical author because I've met a lot of them now. And a lot of them tell me I have all these ideas running around in my head. I have 25 stories right now. I don't do that. I get a seed of an idea and that story comes from it. So with the first book, it was the killing at the construction site. And so with the second book, I had a little idea of something being hidden, and the mystery is resolved around this hidden thing that will solve the mystery. That was my seed of idea for the second book. But I wanted to continue the characters.
Right.
So I went with that. In the third book, my seed of an idea, we're talking all the books now, but
yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
It was we would take our canoe over to the nearby town of Tabor City and ride on Lake Tabor. And there was a house out there that looked neglected and was grown up and had a broken gazebo and a broken dock. And I said to my husband, there's a story behind this house. And I hadn't even started writing yet. So when I got to the third book, I was like, okay,
that's what I'm going to do. Right.
Yeah.
So when people tell you that they have stories running around in your head, I think what they're really saying to you is they have these seeds running around.
Yeah.
Because I have a list of story ideas. That's what I call them. Just little, so the story seeds that are a sentence or two.
Yeah.
And they're all there running around, but they're not fully developed stories. They're just these little seeds. And so when it's time for me to write my next book, I sit and look at those seeds and say, which one of these speaks to me right now? Like, which is the one that is the loudest?
Yeah.
And that's the next one that gets written. So I think you're just like everybody else. You just assume
don't
that they have
many seeds.
Maybe not as many seeds, or maybe your seeds sit very quietly and wait for you to be done and then say, here's the next one.
Yeah, because I do have the fourth one in my head now.
See? So you do. So you are, I think it's the same thing. I think when people tell you they have stories, they don't have the whole book.
Right.
They probably just have that little inspiration, that spark, that thing that happened. And I do the same thing. I had the first one was a story someone told me, and it was like, wow, that is powerful. And I wrote the rest of the book around that little piece of a story. My grandfather said one thing to me, and that was my second book. The third one, I got a wart on my thumb, and because of it, my brother said something about my wart. Asked me if I would get someone to talk it off, and I had never heard that before. So I looked it up, and the next thing you know, I have a whole nother idea for a book.
Okay.
So the same kind of thing where it's just this little thing will happen in your life, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, that's a story idea. So I love that. I know that A Killing on Hardee Street is set in Logan, South Carolina, and I didn't look it up. Is there a Logan, South Carolina? Okay.
No, there isn't. I made sure there wasn't because so it's basically based on Loris, which is where I live.
Okay.
And the other thing is that was my first book, and I took a correspondence course when I was young and on writing, and they said, write what you know. So in that first book, there's a lot of truth. So Logan is Loris, and the Christmas festival that really takes place in Loris. There are a few of the eateries. And so I do that with all three books. The second one is kind of, more Myrtle Beach, and the third one is Tabor City. So I kind of made them local.
Right.
So yeah, I think that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it did.
I just made up Logan because I thought at the time, well, I might not want people to know where I live. But everybody knows where I live.
Now everybody knows anyway,
I went with
right?
a fictional town. But it is kind of fun when local people read it because they're like, I knew exactly where that took place,
Yes. And I think that there's, I know that there are a couple of other authors that I've met that do local And they have a really big following of local people
Yes.
who want to know, because they want to see, like, does the place that I go and shop at, does it show up in this book?
The other thing I did is I grew up in a really small town in Crestline, Ohio, and I lived on Park Avenue, and I walked down to the park, past the swimming pool and tennis courts, over to the ball field. So when Vonda takes her walks in the book, she's actually walking the path. So people that knew me in Crestline can recognize
also see their small town, right?
Yes.
I think it's interesting. You're from Ohio. I actually spent quite a few years in Ohio.
Okay.
After my dad got out of the Air Force, we moved to Ohio. I was 2, and I lived in North Canton until I was 15.
Okay.
So,
Very
yeah,
familiar
so,
with Canton.
yeah, so two Ohio women here.
Yeah.
I know you say you write poetry, and now you've written these cozy mysteries. Have you ever considered writing in a different genre, or do you think cozy mystery is where you're going to stay?
Well, I'm actually getting ready to publish my first poetry book. It will be called Reflections.
Fantastic.
By V.S. Gardner. So yes, I do have. I have it sitting here, but I don't want to show you because I'm changing.
Okay, cover. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So yes.
And when do you hope to have that out?
Maybe within the next few weeks. We're right at the very end. Yep.
Fantastic. That's great.
I have, if you wanted me to read one, I could read one, but I don't need to.
Why don't you do that? Do you have one that you really like?
I have one I would read called Reunion.
Fantastic.
My son and I had not seen each other for 2 years, when your children grow up and move away. So this one is called Reunion. 2 hours I've been driving up State Route 71, filled with sweet anticipation, soon to see my son. Not sure once I see his face if I can stop the tears. I'm praying as I drive. Lord, it's been almost 2 years. Lead us, bless us. Please just give us a great day. With this sweet reunion, there will be so much to say. I think now of the heartache he so recently survived. While pulling in, I call to tell him I've arrived. I see him. Yes, there he is. My walk turns to a trot. We run into each other's arms across the parking lot. Hugging him at last, my heart wonders where he's been. I cannot believe my sweet boy is in my arms again. Gratitude fills my soul in this precious moment of time. This young man I hug is that long-lost son of mine. This is the good stuff, I hear him whisper in my ear. I realize I was right. My eyes have filled with tears. We break apart, lean back, search each other's eyes. Together now we reconnect, rediscovering family ties. A wondrous, beautiful moment. May it never, ever end. As we move beyond mom and son, we'll journey on as friend to friend.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I think that any mother who's ever been separated from her child, even for a small period of time, would recognize that. I too didn't see my son for about 2 years. And as you were reading that, like those images of my own reunion were flashing and I have goosebumps. I actually have goosebumps. So that's fabulous. That's fabulous.
That's just one of them, but there's a lot of different topics in there, but there are family love, like
family and love, and fantastic. Yes. So other than poetry and cozy mystery, anything else that you think that you like in the back of your mind, you think that would be fun to tackle?
Not really. I'm open to anything. But like I said, I don't have a lot of, and I didn't plan to be a mystery writer. I always wanted to write, and I don't know really how I landed on that, but that's what, maybe because I watch a lot of mysteries on TV and read them,
Right. Exactly. So you were telling me that you do have an idea for a 4th book. And is that another cozy?
Yes.
It has Vonda in it?
I don't know that it'll have Vonda in it, but for those who have read them, there are characters, Christian and Leanza, that are in the second book. And this one's going to center on them in Norfolk, Virginia. That's where they're both from. So it's going to change the setting, and it's going to change, and then they'll have a mystery that they're working on. And like you said, I don't always know where the story goes. So Vonda could come back in.
You just never know.
I just never know. I didn't really know that I would bring this Leanza into the 3rd book, but there was a mystery in that one, and she ended up being called upon to help solve it.
And it was perfect. When she
Yes.
came in, I thought, oh, what the perfect person for this. This
Yep.
is perfect. Yeah, that's
Yep.
great. So you say that you don't really know where the books are going. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I'm definitely a pantser.
Yeah.
For people who don't know what that means, because I said that to my husband the other day, and he said, I don't know what a pantser is. So yes, a plotter does the whole outline. A pantser just starts writing and the story comes.
Right. I tell everyone they write by the seat of their pants. That's what a pantser
That's what
is.
it's
It's
called,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
So when I
Yeah.
wrote A Killing on Hardee, like I said, I wrote the killing in the first chapter, and then I sat down and thought, well, why did he do it? Who did it? Are they going to cover it up? You know, is it going to come out? What exactly is going to happen? And I put a lot of my life in it. So that will be interesting, I think, to readers, because the way Vonda and Stanley end up in Logan is the way my husband and I ended up. The story of their house selling, them discussing it on their way where they were going, that's all true.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we ended up, I kind of took us and put us here. So we were new in this community. Vonda's new in this community, and she's having to get her bearings. And, you know, so I wrote that in there. I was going somewhere with that, but I forget where I was going.
That's all right. That's all right.
So
So
writing things that you know.
that you know. So you say that there's a lot of you in this story. How much of you and Vonda are the same? Like, are you Vonda?
Vonda is, I aspire to be Vonda.
Okay.
Let me say it that way.
All right.
Vonda has a very strong faith. She's a prayer warrior. She prays herself through a little bit of a pickle situation. Is that a word? You got yourself in a pickle? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I hope I would be that strong in that kind of situation. But yeah, a lot of her life is centered around me.
Centered around
and
you.
My husband, who is very supportive, but he wouldn't read the book. I would tell him about it. And when I finished the book, I let him read it. I went away for the weekend. And when I came back, he said, that Stanley is a really nice guy. Well, Stanley is based on my husband.
Right. So, you said, of course he is, darling.
So Steve recognized himself, but yeah.
Yeah, so. Fantastic.
The other thing I do along that line is I use real people's names in my books. I have fun with that. So, you know, as you read all of them, there would be, if you know my family, you know, my daughters are both main strong characters, their names.
Right.
Jeremy Allen, the FBI agent, is our oldest son. So I just pulled names out of my life. Leanza was actually my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Leanza Clementine, and that's the name I used in the second book. So I just have fun doing that. And my father is George, and my mother is Dorma, and I dedicated the second book to them. And my dad does recitations. He does the Old Ragged Flag by Johnny Cash for veterans events. So I wrote one of his recitations into the story. So anybody who likes to know that kind of stuff.
Right. So there's a lot of truth in this story.
Yes.
But Vonda is not 100% you, because I don't believe, if tell me if I'm incorrect, you've never been in the middle of some mystery.
No, I haven't.
So
I mean, little ones like, where did I place something?
Yes. Like why did I put my cell phone in the refrigerator? But not anything like, you know, why did somebody
big thing.
Why did someone get killed on Hardee Street? That was not anything that you've been in. All right.
And in the book, and I will say in the book, Vonda is a widow. And one of my children said, you killed Dad off. And it was like, yeah. And I've had people say, I'm sorry. And I didn't lose my husband. That's just part of the story.
Right. So. And that opens it up. Like you said, I thought it was interesting when you said you don't like to read romance, because there is a little bit of a romance / love story. It is not the focus of this book, but it's there. It's kind of there in the background. And it's, you know, there's these undercurrents that run through the whole time. So I just thought it was interesting that you would say that. And yet in your book, you opened her up by having her be a widow. You opened her up to the possibilities of romance.
Yeah. And with that book, I didn't move the love story quickly, because I know some widows. I know some ladies who have lost their husbands, and they're like, that's something that takes time. You know, grief is different for everyone. And there is a grief storyline in that book. And one of the satisfactions I get as a writer which is very fulfilling, is to have people be able to relate to what you've written. And I've had people who have had loss say to me, grief really does come in waves like that. Grief really does, affect you in those ways. And there's a grief share storyline in there. And the character that I wrote as the counselor, her actual name is Helen Rossman, and she was a grief share leader in my past life. And I got a hold of her and said, would grief affect someone in this way? And she shared those resources with me. So I used them in writing the book. So anybody who's had grief may find comfort in the book. It's helped. And I actually had a reader get a hold of me and say, I see anger in my son who lost his father, and I didn't realize it was probably unresolved grief. And she was going to seek counseling for her son. So that kind of stuff for me is what makes it
gold.
Yes.
I know. It is absolutely gold.
And I love to hear from readers, just so
yes. So absolutely. I also know that you put something in every one of your books.
Yes, I do.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I will show.
No, that's all right.
She's talking about butterflies.
Every single one. Yep.
This one, it's on there. My name, Vanessa, is a red butterfly. It's a certain species of butterfly. I found that out when I was about 13, and I kind of began to collect butterflies, and that became, and so, it's of ancient Greek origin. It means butterfly. And the butterfly, to me, there's a lot of symbolism around the butterfly. It's just a symbol of new life. They come out of the cocoon and they have new life and, just freedom. And they're just beautiful, symbolic creatures to me. So every one of my stories has a butterfly fluttering around. They're all a little different. So, yeah.
I love that. I love how you have found that piece of you that you're going to put into all of your books. And the butterfly isn't a main component. And so if someone didn't notice it, it certainly isn't going to change the book. But it's something that if you've read all of her books, which I have, then you will see that butterfly come up. I don't think I noticed it in the first one. And then I think I kind of noticed it in the second. And by the third one, it was like, there's that butterfly again. This is a theme, so you start to recognize it that way. Well, fantastic. One of the things that you just said is that you love to hear from readers. So Vanessa, how could someone get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out and ask you about your books or your poetry that's coming out? What would they do?
Well, I have a Facebook wall. I don't have a website. I do most of my social media through the V.S. Gardner Facebook wall. And most people know how to messenger. So you just send me a message on Messenger and I would respond to that. And then I also have an email address, vsgbooks2020@gmail.com.
Fantastic. I'll have those in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to Vanessa, you can click those. Vanessa, is there anything you wish that I had asked you or talked about that we didn't bring up today?
Well, I can't really think of anything. I always have fun mentioning that I use real names. I have fun with the butterfly thing. You've covered all of that.
Well, good.
So nothing's jumping out at me.
Real briefly, let's show each one of your books one more time and tell us the names so that people know what to get.
This is A Killing on Hardee Street. This is where it all started with Vonda. And then we have A Brick to Remember. I will mention this. My husband is an artist, self-taught artist, and I asked him to paint the cover for this book and the third book. So I gave him the seed of the idea on this one, which is this little girl is 4 years old when her father goes missing. She grows up to become an advocate for missing people, and she sleep types. And there are phrases in her sleep typing about a brick and a brick wall and a toy and a name and her dad. And so these are clues. And so that just gives you the idea of the mystery. But my husband painted that for me. And then we did The Forgotten Home. And he also did this painting. And that was based on the house that we drove out there and saw. And in this story, a baby goes missing in the first chapter. And you follow the baby, the parents, and the person behind it all. and the child spends some time in this home when they're very young and they forget about it. So thus you have the forgotten home that comes back when the memories start to come back. So those are my 3 books. I hope that you'll read them and enjoy them.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Teri, for having me come and share
about them. Thank you. And like I say at the end every time, folks, if you read one of these books, make sure you go and review it. As an author, we absolutely love reviews. Yes. And definitely reach out to Vanessa. She's a joy to get to know and loves talking about being an author and anything to do with writing. So definitely reach out.
Okay. Yep. All right. We're passionate about our books and our stories.
We are. Well, Vanessa, it has been wonderful having you with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Teri. Wishing you the best with everything you're doing too.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Teri M Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.